Whatever may be the excuse this time, the federal government must note that numerous productive hours are being lost to filling stations by motorists while savings of commuters are getting depleted with the hike in transport costs. Now, despite claims to the removal of subsidy in the downstream sector of the petroleum industry and the fact that the pump price has also quadrupled since the Tinubu administration actually assumed office as at May 2023, snake-like queues of vehicles at filling stations have become a common feature. What is becoming clear is that no remarkable progress has been made in the management of our downstream petroleum sector vis-à-vis apprehending the cyclical or perennial, or will I call it, seasonal fuel scarcity, even when Nigerians are paying far more than they did in times past. On Viewpoint today, where we discover perspectives and embrace dialogue, I've got with me my co-host Pelumi Awe, and we'll be talking or taking a look into the recent fuel scarcity, which has further impacted negatively on the country seasonally. Pelumi, you're welcome to the show.
Glad to be here again.
Now, it's not new to the ear. Anytime it's a case of fuel scarcity, it was usually taking place mostly in our younger days in Decembers. But now, as we speak now, it has become an epileptic affair whereby it's off and on like our power supply these days. It just comes on, off and on. So I want to believe you have something for the next phase of the show, right?
Sure.
Now, you do well to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Veegil Media, and follow us across various social media platforms. Join us in the next phase of Welcome back to the show. The show is Viewpoint, where we discover perspectives and embrace dialogue. I've got with me Pelumi Awe. Pelumi, once again, you're welcome to the show. Now, for a country with immense abundance of crude oil, where PMS, premium motor spirits, diesel, gas, which we use for cooking, we happen to be producing these products. Why? Because we have crude oil. Now, why must it be a seasonal affair to this incessant snake-like use, always resurface, dictating fuel scarcity?
Well, you would assume that because of the opening or the launching of Dangote refinery, you'll assume that we shouldn't have this kind of thing happen at this time. And to have it that you have the federal government thinking of increasing the cost of getting power supply, to also have inflation figures go up at this time, and then to have this happen is so disturbing, and I think it's depressing for most Nigerians. I think there are a couple of issues that can be traced to this, because when the federal government declared the removal of fuel subsidy last year, May, and you will assume that because it's now a willing buyer, willing seller system where you have to, a filling station has to set the price that they want people to pay them to get what they have. Meaning that any filling station that sells lower than other filling stations will get more customers go to them. But seeing what has happened in the last couple of weeks is very, very disturbing. And one of the critical issues that we mentioned is the logistics issue. The NNPC is supposed to be the seller of last resort, in that when everything else fails, the NNPC is supposed to ensure that the people get access to petrol all over the country. But to see what has happened so far so good is a disturbing thing, and I think it's something we're talking about.
Okay, now you made mention of this subsidy. It's been a case of subsidies, and I noticed that immediately the subsidy was removed by this current administration, the Tinubu administration to be specific here. The price of everything skyrocketed in a drastical manner astronomically. Now, my question is, how has it impacted Nigerians now? And this current now scarcity, how will it impact further, judging from the recent scarcity of even food supply, cost of living, just to mention a whole lot?
Somebody put up on Facebook some days ago, I think it was Mr. Yemi Shodimu, a popular veteran in the acting industry, Yoruba acting industry, put up the fact that he got petrol at 1,200 naira in Ibadan.
Okay, if I get you right, that should be the Saka fellow, right?
Yeah, no, not Saka fellow, but it was in that league at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was around that he said he bought for 1.2 in Ibadan, and that's a liter of petrol. And what we are heavily dependent on petrol at the moment in Nigeria. Many African nations are as well, because you have to find a way of generating power supply. And countries that don't use generators a lot. Africa is the continent that uses probably the largest number of generators in the world because of power issues. And so if getting petrol is that thing, people depend on it. And the person who wants to barb, for instance, thank God for rechargeable clippers. The barber who wants to barb needs power supply to be able to get that done. The person who is the dry cleaner, for instance, needs power to get that done. So I don't need to use the dry cleaner. I can wash in my house and then put it on even if it's squeezed or so. But it doesn't really look right for those working in the bank, because you work at the bank, most bankers tend to give their clothes dry cleaners to help them dry. So, and then also most of our vehicles use petrol to move from place to place. And the federal government is thinking of even releasing a number of vehicles that can be maybe solar vehicles that can ensure that people use less of petrol, because most Nigerians are the means of transportation, the means of productivity is very dependent on the cost of petrol. And once the cost of petrol goes up, everything else is affected. It's not just in Nigeria, it's in every country in the world. Every country in the world where what they use as a means of major production, what they use as major means of transportation is petrol. Once the price and the fee of petrol goes up, it affects every other thing. So the increment we are seeing now, so far so good. We've seen that things have quadrupled in the last couple of months. We're not just buying, for instance, the food inflation figure for the month of March was over 40%. Now, and at the time, there was still petrol everywhere. And the NNPC is even saying now that it's not that there's no sufficient petrol. So it's not that there's no sufficient
sorry
petrol.
to cut you short now. NNPC says it's not that there's no sufficient petrol now. I want to believe, therefore, there will be inadequacies or lapses. Now, what are these lapses or inadequacies, and how can they be corrected or checkmated?
But a couple of issues. So what has been said again is that logistic issues, transporting the petrol that they have to the other branches. Marketers are saying that we are waiting. They are open to buying. They are open to getting these things. But the NNPC is saying that, but the issues that have been said is logistic issues. And that the federal government also said that at some point,
now when it comes to logistic issues, you just stated something whereby an economy that is dependent on petrol for productivity. Now, does it mean that even the NNPC lacks petrol just as our power holding company lacks electricity to function?
Not entirely. What they do lack is, for instance, a system of transporting what they have to different locations. And I read an article that the federal government instructed, or the NNPC instructed, that the petrol should be distributed first to the federal capital territory, Abuja, before going to another state. So when that is clear, they said it is until when Abuja is satisfied that it can go to other parts of the state. For instance, River State, no issue there. In fact, within an article, it was that River State, they have in abundance there, that if this thing lingers longer than necessary, it might affect them. But at the moment, check the videos from River State. No long queues like we have in Lagos. So I think a lot of things has to be said as touching. Logistics is more than just moving vehicles. It's to ensure that there is a process that secures distribution of what you want to do. So, for instance, you have God is Good as one of that logistic companies. You have different companies that are in that space there.
Okay, you feel it should be outsourced?
And maybe outsourced, but something else is to be able to draw the map that what states in Nigeria do they consume most petrol? Okay, if we know that, then you don't just focus on Abuja alone as a place you want to distribute petrol. You want to reach out, ensure that there is a system on ground. Lagos on its own houses over 2 million people from different parts of Nigeria. So Lagos should be let's say the priority list. Let's say top 2 or top 3 states that should be given preference. Now preference is the word, but it's clear, all right? Given preference as touching distribution of petrol.
So it therefore means that concentration should actually be zeroed in on metropolitan cities.
Definitely.
Because if we look at it now, the FCT, which is the capital now, is a metropolitan city. Likewise, Lagos, a former state capital. And then we should talk about the likes of Rivers, which you mentioned, and probably Calabar and maybe Kano. These are major states where we know, yes, motorists, or there's high commuter traffic and also motorist traffic. Now, a situation whereby you talked about available options. We now remain dependent on electrical vehicles, or probably maybe solar-powered vehicles. Now, what will now be the maintenance culture?
Okay, well, maintenance culture, I think when I was giving my point the other time, you mentioned if the distribution should be outsourced. We have seen over time that when private individuals take charge of certain things, they try to do it to the best of their ability, ensuring that they deliver as effectively as possible, and then so that they can get their profit. So it's a known fact that private individuals, capitalist society, make things smoother. For instance, UK, for instance, now operate a capitalist system, and it's working for them. So if the government can begin to look at ways of ensuring that we give these things out to companies, we're going to pay this amount of money, or we're going to ensure that this gets distributed to the people that need it. Because this is a problem that speaks about future problems. If we don't solve this now, there'll be issues in the future. Now, talking about maintenance of some of the things that we want to have, the federal government is thinking of pushing out some vehicles that we use most likely solar. And then we have it in Aba. In Aba, for instance, I think there's a system that they generate power. I think they call it geometric power plant or so in Aba. And so we have systems that can help us. In fact, the vehicles I spoke about now, I learned that they had to import some of the parts from outside the country and couple it here. We should most likely seek out people who are making this happen. There are companies already in Nigeria today who have a system of maintaining some of these things. And so we can reach out to them and have them come on board and to see how they can make sure that the maintenance is sure. But the point is this: I have seen the government create things that they cannot maintain. They cannot maintain. And it's disturbing. For instance, and this is, I must commend. Sometimes we talk about issues in Nigeria. We don't know that if we look at it very deeply, we need to commend the government for some of the things the government is doing. I don't work with the government, but I see that, for instance, I think I was doing Market Square today and at some point, and I realized that the federal government of Nigeria had called governors. It was on Tuesday's edition. Had called governors together, and the governors made commitment to solve power issues within about 2 years or so. That's remarkable. I saw also that the owner of Zenith Bank, Jovia, was also placed on the board of a particular board in federal government. Those are moves to ensure that private individuals who have successful results come on board.
It's a way or case of practicing a mixed economy here, not just the government actually taking charge of economical activities. Okay, now, the question I'd like to ask now is, do you feel now, because subsidy is removed, with this current administration promising to alleviate the difficulties in which Nigerians are passing through, with the corruption which has gone on for a very long period of time, running into 6 decades now, the NNPC now, which is the father figure when it comes to the oil sector, how will the corruption now be addressed? Because this corruption, at the long run, or in the long run rather, Nigerians bear the brunt. And the interpretation of what is actually thrown out there is actually a case of false scarcity. Why? Because there's been mismanagement of funds. Because if there was no mismanagement of funds, there won't be issues of logistics here. Probably maybe funds which were channeled towards securing maybe 100 trucks to deliver petroleum products nationwide were actually tampered with. So a situation whereby corruption now still lingers on. We had the likes of cases which are still ongoing, and it is pending locally and globally. Now we have Desiani also, just to mention a few also, who have allegation charges. How will this corruption case now be curbed?
Well, I saw an interview by Mr. Shimon Kibaloye and the owner of Budget, and the man said that subsidies still exist. Subsidies still exist. That the government is paying few subsidy in a way. If not, the price will have skyrocketed. And the point is, I think what the EFCC is doing at the moment, in terms of pulling up stunts and picking up the top guns, people that you think are untouchable. We know the issue, Yaya Bello's issue at the moment. Just picking up people that are prominent and just walking up to them boldly, telling them to come for interview and all of that. I think it's a way to shake the system, to ensure that before you can act in a way that is corrupt, you have to think about it twice. You think about the consequence of what you're about to do. So I think a system of tracking delivery has to be created. Remember that the NNPC has been privatized, and so they said they have not released their report so far so good of how much they are paid or so. And they asked them, they say, because a private firm can choose not to. And so they've not done that, and no problem with that. But the federal government has to make a commitment to Nigerians to say, we are on top of issues. And I think they're making that commitment, they're making that move happen. And to even see how that corruption is copful. One of the critical issues discussed, or one of the cases in support of the removal of fuel subsidy is that a lot of the money that you go into developing different parts of Nigeria is being stolen by people along the way. And that's something that they said. And so we're going to owe them to their words. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's will be 1 month this month, 1 year this month, most likely at some point this month. So we're going to check. Like I said it maybe last January or February, that when somebody's applied in the company, is given 6 months probation. So you say, let's see what you can do. Sometimes 1 year. Let's see what you can do. Let's see we're on the same page. Not just if we're on the same page. Not just if we like you. If you like us, we're going to see that work. But it's not going to happen here. Your probationary period ends after 4 years, and if you want to do 4 years, then we will now give you the go ahead.
So now to you now on a probationary observation, now has the 1 year been official? Okay,
well, speaking as an economist, we have to look at the fiscal side, also look at the monetary side. With respect to inflation, inflation is still the way it's been for a while, but we have seen improvement so far so good. Whilst the inflation rate for food hit 40% last month, but I think more than the figures on ground, I think it's the moves for me. I'm encouraged. Although the move to increase the electricity tariff is not the best possible thing to do at this time, but the move to see, okay, where we're trying to get Euro bonds for about $1 billion, we're seeking out money from the IMF or World Bank to be able to see that we can make things happen in Nigeria. We're also seeing how that governments are coming together to see how they can ensure that power supply is improved. So those are moves that are encouraging. Now, once we are done this month, once we check the report card, the maths, F9, maybe no matter. But check the report card. Check the report card for President Tinubu.
Does the A1 outweigh the F9 or the F9 outweighs the A1?
I think it's C5 for me, generally. C5 in total.
Okay, you choose to sit on the fence.
Yeah, fair. Okay. So I think in the next 12 months, we should be able to see the fruit from the moves made. If we don't see this fruit, then there are issues we have to discuss.
Okay,
again.
now in recent reports as at 30th of April now, the House of Reps now there's hierarchy here. We have the chief executive, we have the red chamber, which is the Senate, then we have the green chamber, which is the House of Reps now. They have actually summoned the Minister for Petroleum and Minister of State for Petroleum. Now, the Minister of Petroleum now happens to be the chief executive, Tinubu. Do you feel he's going to be answerable to this call?
And as you said, representative, we know he's I don't want to call them his boys.
Will it be advisable if his boys actually represent him, or he will go there to answer?
Well, let me see. I think that is
because even when they were even asked on their own part, they remain indifferent as to who should actually come and be answerable to that question.
The person who would most likely go there is Mr. Waledo. That's the person who most likely appear there, because
not the Minister of State, Heineken Lokobi.
So I think the person, because if you check the president's cabinet and all, you realize that the people he has been using to speak at different events and to speak for him have been the people he has used in Lagos. When he's been Wale Edun
as governor,
Dele Alake, Yemi Kados, those are the people that he can actually fund. In fact, when they disclosed the issue of the fact that there'll be 1 week transport subsidy last year, December, guess who announced? It was the Minister for Mineral Resources, Dele Alake, who announced it. So the president has a lot of people in his bank there to say, see, help me go there and tell them about this. This is what we are doing. But we know the issues already. And it's projected that before the end of this week, the scarcity experience would reduce.
Okay, now on a conclusive note, now in your own opinion, now I began in the first phase of the show by stating, if you recall, that back then in previous administrations, the fuel scarcity was always taking place towards the end of the year, and it was perceived that it was a ploy by the opposition to alter the existence of the ruling party, who was actually at governance. Now, what will be a lasting solution? Because if we go back as far back as the 90s, we're talking 1994 to 1999 during the military regime, there were times when fuel was even being adulterated. Diesel was also adulterated likewise, where people will have to practically sleep in filling stations for days running into weeks. Now, what will you prefer will be a lasting solution?
What would be a lasting solution to what we're experiencing at the moment is that, given the issue that has been placed on ground, that it's a logistics issue and touching and that's like takeoff distribution. So the port, from the port to the port, or from the station NNPC to different parts. I think a system that ensures that there is speedy delivery is created. That to be done, and if it has to be outsourced, let's do that. Let's give it to a company that can make that happen for us. Number two is to fast track the process of approval for Dangote. I learned Dangote Refinery has not been approved for distribution, so Dangote Refinery should be approved for that. Okay, it's in Lagos, and given that Lagos is also a metropolitan city where you have a lot of movement happening here and there, if you have Dangote, it means that Dangote has to feed the people in Lagos first before going out of Lagos. The government should look at ensuring that the speed of the process of approving Dangote Refinery to make things happen, because even the government has stake in Dangote. So just why not speed things up there? Number three will be to address the issue of vandalism. That's an issue that has not been spoken about enough. Our security infrastructure in this country is shaky, not strong yet. While we say we have been dealing with Boko Haram for over 10 years now. So we need to speed up the process of ensuring that our security infrastructure and architecture is strong enough to ensure that people are confident to come into the system. Also, there should be something that there should be penalty. If you ordering means artificial scarcity, creating artificial scarcity. So when you have companies creating artificial scarcity, they should be made to face the wrath of the law. And then also again, it means that monitoring is bad. Monitoring is bad. Look at the exchange rates the other time when you had bureau de changes, people charging them 2,000 naira to get $1. EFCC went after them. They arrested many people in Abuja, and from that point, everybody became normal. In Nigeria, if they don't see punishment, they will not organize. People organize themselves.
No, they need the iron man.
So they organize themselves, and people have been calling for military regime and all of that to come in place, but they need to go and read history.
No, they need to read the history books where they say the worst, the best military government, or what? How is it put?
The worst civilian government is better than the best military government. And so we need to be able to sort all of these things. I'm talking about logistics, speaking about speeding up Dangote Refinery approval, also speaking about confronting the issue of vandalism head on. I think those are the things we have to do. And then also, again, monitoring the system there. Yeah.
Okay, that will be it on today's show on Viewpoint, where we discover perspectives and embrace dialogue. We've heard from Pelumi Awe taking time to underscore or underline mechanisms to be adopted to address fuel scarcity from hoarding, and a whole lot which he has just mentioned conclusively on the show. Now, from a seasonal gaze, daily, weekly, and yearly, hikes in cost of staple foods, transportation, school fees, house rents, and other routine expenses, Nigerians are groaning and moaning under harsh economic conditions arising from recent reform measures. Now, to add fuel scarcity to their issues or problems, I must say, in my own view and my opinion, is indefensible. The fact that subsidies are still being paid, fuel costs astronomically on the rise, and commodities now also no longer readily available raises pertinent questions that demand urgent answers from the Tinubu administration. I'm Odiawa AI, and the show has been Viewpoint, where we discover perspectives and embrace dialogue. You do well to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Veegil Media, and follow us across various social media platforms. Thanks for watching.